In trigonometry, there are three things you can use to find missing angles. You can use sine, which you use the measurements of the opposite angle over the hypotenuse. You can use cosine, where you use the adjacent angle over the hypotenuse, and you can use tangent, which is what I use, where you use opposite over adjacent. Trigonometry was invented by Hipparchus of Archaea. The measurements I used were my height, which is 5'7", and then the length of my shadow at different times of the day, and we can plug those numbers into a calculator to find the angle of elevation. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the visual drawing I did of the angles of elevation for the sun. So this is 9 a.m. and as you can see, my height, 67 inches, is the same as the length of my shadow at this time of the day, the average length of my shadow. And the degree I measured for this, or the degree I calculated, was 45 degrees. So it looks like this. That's how the sun is shining. That's the angle of elevation of the sun. So the sun would be like there. This is at 1 p.m. This is my height again, and then the average length of my shadow at that time, which is 28 inches and 67 inches, and then the angle I got is 67 degrees. So the sun would be here and the angle's here. Then the last one is the 5 p.m. time. And again, my height is here like always, and then here is the average length of the shadow at that time of the day. And then my angle of elevation for this that I calculated was 21 degrees, and the sun would be here because it's shining like this. Find all these values. I used tangent, which is opposite over adjacent. And so I would, for example, with this one, I could plug 67 inches, which is the opposite to the angle, over 67 inches, which is the adjacent to the angle, for tangent, and then plug tangent and then those values into a scientific calculator, and then I get my degrees, which is 45 degrees. These are the discussion questions that I have to answer at the end of my project. I have them right here. The first question, what observations did you make about your shadow at various times of the day? I noticed that in the morning, my shadow was around the same height as me. And I noticed in the afternoon, my shadow was really short. And in the evening, my shadow was really long. How can you use the angle of the sun to predict information about the heights of buildings if you know the length of the shadow? Well, you can do it in the same way how the height would be the missing number, and you can have the angle, you can calculate the angle of the sun, and if you know the angle of the sun and if you know the length of the shadow, then you can just find the missing number of the height of the building. Like I did, but just kind of like mix it up a little bit, you know what I mean? How can you calculate the angle at which you must look up at the top of the Empire State Building if you know the distance away from the building? Okay, well, if you know your distance away from the building, that would be like in the same position as your shadow. It's the length away from the building. Then if you know the height of the building, then you can find the angle at which you look up. It would be the same thing. You would use tangent, and you would fill in the missing numbers, and you use a calculator, and then find your answer, and find what angle you're looking up at. How can trigonometry make calculations in real life much simpler? Well, trigonometry, if you have something missing of like a height, or if you have an angle and you need to figure something out, and you don't want to go measuring things and you don't want to use all these weird contraptions, you can just use math and figure out like the angle of the sun, the angle at which you're seeing things, the height of buildings. I don't know, it can just make things easier for you. So I hope you enjoyed my project. Thank you for watching. I really had fun with this one. All right, bye. Thank you.